yeah, it's about the operating model for FEMDI. First of all, we will try to go through what it is and why do we need it. You can read it here, and what we are focusing on at the moment. Also, we will claim that it will actually save money, even though it takes some resources to actually develop and make this operating model and implement it. So as you see, if you have questions on the way, then please put them in the chat, and then I think Jane has promised to keep track of questions. Yeah, and here the first slide, you can see there's the star on the left. There are five different topics in the operating model. But what it is first and foremost, it's the policy, standards, and processes needed in order to operate FEMDI once we have it gone live and we have built it and we are implemented it to be a production system. So yeah, where possible, we will use the standards and the processes that are already in place in UMedNet, in UMedNet programs. So we will build on what is already there, and we will, of course, as you know, we will. It should be released and gone live as a system, functioning system by 2026, and as Jeremy also showed you, it's slowly progressing and coming to life. And while the technical team is working on implementing the community components and all the technical stuff that is needed for FEMDI to work, we will continue in the policy track or expert team to develop the operating model as we go along, so it will fit with the technical resources that are technical capabilities that are being built. Yeah, and also I should say that the operating model, this work includes also the financial costs of the community capabilities that will have to, that we're building and that we will need hosting for. So we need a FEMDI lead, as we have for other UMedNet programs. For example, the observations capability area. We need a member to take responsibility for leading and managing FEMDI going forward. So it's and the operating model is being developed, so we can rely on it. As you can see here, we will have no surprises, and we will know what to do, how to tap new data in, and what standards and requirements are need to be met for both for data publishers and for the community components that are being built. I think we can go to next slide, please. Yeah. And I'm happy that Jeremy also introduced these different roles for you, data owners, data publishers, local capability operators. These are the roles that are, and also, of course, and also the color codes. You are familiar with those. The brown stuff is the UMedNet, and the blue is the WMO components, that the community components that FEMDI are using or is using. And this, I would say that this local capability operator, it for me as a Dane, it sounds really estranging, but it's a capability is more or less an IT service, and it provides this IT service provides the capability for publishing the data in this example. So let's see. Yeah, please go on, Jane. The next slide. And we have sort of 5 themes or processes that the operating model covers. I would say at least the three lower parts, but performance management, service management, and participation management, these are standard services or processes that need to be in place in order for FEMDI to operate correctly. And then we have governance and assurance. That's more the policies, the standards, all the formal stuff that needs to be in place, agreements, and so on. And capability development is more like, you could call it a process, but that's the stuff we need to do when we expand the use and add new functionality to FEMDI. So this is what the operating model covers, you could say. Next slide, please. And yeah, I think you can push a few buttons here in the capability management area, development area. We have decided not to work on this at this point. It needs to be developed, but we will take the most important things first. And please move on. Same for governance and assurance. We need data governance. That's and all these governance and assurance part, we will. This is where we will use all the governance and the policies already in place in HumanNet programs. But data governance, as you can see, there's a local component here for the data publishers. They need to decide what the data can be used for and on which conditions. So there's a governance part here. So please move on, Jane, to the next processes. Participation management, that's all about how to plug in a new data set and plug in a new member, a new data publisher. That's some important points and agreements and things that need to be in place, and that's what the participation management is about. Next one, service management. These are standard IT service management processes, which are important, but these are also not the first focus we have is now doing this the Rodeo project. We are still in development phases, so we will also postpone working on these, you could say. And performance management, that's about keeping track of how and who is using how much the FEMDI infrastructure is being used, and the performance, how well is it is performing. And we also are not have chosen not to work on these now. I could say, yeah. So here is what we initially focus on in the policy group. That's the data governance. It's community capability management. That's the shared infrastructure for the components in the central components in FEMDI. The data sharing management is about onboarding new publishers and their data sets, and the local capability management is what needs to be done at the data publisher side. So these are what we chose to or chose as the most important parts to define and to develop in order to start using FEMDI. So and the first one I will go through is the onboarding and offboarding of FEMDI local capabilities. That's adding new data publishers and capability operators. So I think that's...
Awesome. Charlie's got his hand up. Should we just take that before we carry on?
Sure. Please go
yeah.
ahead.
Thanks, Morten. I've got some concerns actually that no activity is taking place in service management, and it's an experienced one. So service management, obviously, product management, ongoing and enduring is the heart of keeping the system alive and running and enduring over time. And it would be good to see something towards estimating what that might look like as a parallel activity. Fully appreciate that the money might not be there to do that
Yes.
meaningfully right now, but I think it's terribly important that work is put into the costs to members, essentially, in order to understand how and what, how it will be supported in the future and what that will cost, particularly in tough budget times. So just making that point, but accept that the priorities that you've taken are the right ones, Morten. Thank you.
I forgot to mention that what we chose to focus on at this point is just what we felt or judged as being the most important, and to the components that have to be in place first. It's not that we will not prioritize the others, and they are really important. I fully agree with that. And I should also say that I think this work started by the Met Office. I at least know that the Met Office has done a lot of pre-work on this operating model even before the Rodeo application took place, and that's a huge spreadsheet, a really exhaustive spreadsheet of with a lot of content about each of these components, what they encompass, and what needs to be done, and what would be necessary and nice to have, and all that. So that spreadsheet was sort of the starting point for the policy group to work on, and so the most of the work that I have been participating in is to help prioritizing what not to do first. So these are so we will come to that service management. I fully agree. It's and also, as on the first slide we stated that, so everyone knows what to expect, both the users and the data publishers. What does the infrastructure do for us, and how will it perform? How reliable will it be? That's what service management is all about also. Yes.
Morten, I think that Estelle has joined us now, so it's up to you to decide, the two of you to decide if you continue or if Estelle takes part of it.
I think Estelle is really good at explaining all this, but I can go on if Estelle wants to have a break. I think it's really early morning for Estelle, but it's all, I will leave it to Estelle.
Well, I'm awake. I'm really sorry. I'm late. I had some issues here with the link, so I'm really sorry. For me, it's really up to you. I'm fine. I can take over, or you can continue. For me, it's both fine. For me, it doesn't. I'm awake anyway, so for me, that's okay. Whatever.
Yeah, if you're prepared still, I think you will do the last bit better than me. So please go ahead if it's you're up to it, and then I will chip in if I have something more to say. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I doubt that, but so please just let me know if you had already something explained, or if you're missing on something. So I just kind of joined. So welcome from my side, and I guess you started with the local capability. Did you already explain what it is all about? Or can you just quickly give me maybe a second brief what you stopped? Okay, yeah. So that's the next one. Okay, as Morten just explained, we focused on that, and as you said, absolutely right. We did a lot of work, so we did not just do work on those. We did also have work on many others, and we have this extended spreadsheet. But the point is, we just felt like we're getting lost if we do everything at once. So what we did, we started to look more into detail in these 4 components that we just had, and we'd like to just quickly explain you. We're not going to go into detail, so please don't get scared if you have these really detailed slides ahead of you. But we just wanted to explain you what we did, and if someone is interested, we're happy to explain further on the baseline of this Excel sheet what has been done and what is still around. So for each of these components, now in this specific case, it's local capability management, we decided what activities are really entailed while doing this local capability management. We were looking into these different steps, into these different activities, and what's also important, we were looking on who is doing that, since that's really also a major part. The major part in the operating model is also about assigning roles and responsibilities, so it's clear if what needs to be done, but also by whom it needs to be done. So as you can see with the colors, as we already saw on the slide before, we do have different parties which are involved. We do have the green one, which is the local, the data suppliers, which is actually all of you who participate in this activity, who will supply data. But we do also have the FEMDI part. We have a certain role of the WMO mechanisms which are already in place, and we do also have the human bodies, so on the higher level of governance. So we just really wanted, as an overview, an overview to have all these different activities which are being part of this local capability management and assigned by humanists. But then, in addition, if you click further, we do have for each of them, we describe what is needed, what do we need as an input in order to be able to carry out this activity. But also, and that's the next one, what do we expect to come out? So we need to understand for having a clear understanding of each of these capability, because that's also something that we realized over time, that just using certain terms, people would understand different things. So we describe for each of these activities, we each describe what is expected, what do we need that we can even get started with, what is the minimum, but also what needs to come out in order for this activity to be successful. So we did for each of these components that you just saw before, we did that. And if you go back to the next slide, we did that not just for the local capability management, but we also did it for the data sharing management, which is really important for onboarding and offboarding new APIs, which we will offer. So even here, you see again, we do have the data sharing part of the members, but we also show the role of the components which are already being in place, either by WMO, but the ones who want to be set in place by FEMDI. So there's quite an important role here for all of the members, since they will be the ones who have to supply the data, will share their data. The principle is the same. We do have input and output, and if you go to the next one, we do have the community capability management. And here, I think the difference between this one with the others is that there's a very, very strong role of human already in place. We do want to use standard processes and things which are already in place. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to rely on what's being around and what has been established over time. And you can see also, if you see with the activities and the roles, this is really the part on where we do have the operators of this local these common components, and we do also have FEMDI as an organization, which here is under control and which has the say in it. So you also see on the left side part that we try to reuse as many of the standard processes of HumanNet as possible. So as I said, we can really embed this into the whole HumanNet framework and don't come up with something new. If you go back again, then we have the fourth of the component we were looking at, which is the data governance. And here I'd like to explain a little bit further, since this is not just about the activities, but it has a lot to do with policies. We need to explain to people, if they publish the data, how they need to do it. They need to describe the metadata. They have a mandate to come up. They need to also they need to apply to the usage policy of the API gateway. There's a lot of terms of use. They need to agree on the data sharing. So it's a big part on policies underlying this whole process. So this has another level here that comes with it. And if you see again the human governance process, which are embedding all of these activities. And if you go now to the next slide, you can see what we did. We used again the same structure, the same principle as it did with the others, with the roles and the activities. But in addition to everything else, we also described which policy is needed in which steps of the whole end-to-end chain. We were looking at the whole end-to-end process on how we publish the data, and we said here we do need to have the metadata maintenance publication. They need to respect. Here we do have the way how they have to come up with notifications. So it really should make the link. The one thing is to do the activity, but also to understand the way how they have to do it in order to be able to ensure that everyone does it the same way, so that we kind of aligned and get the structure gone, which is working for everyone. If you go to the next one. So you see, and as Morten already said, we focused on those 4, but we are absolutely aware that this is only the start, but we thought it's the beginning. We have to get people on board. We have to get the APIs embedded. So we had to create that part first so that we can get started. But of course, all the other ones are important as well. And we, especially as soon as the solution is a bit further developed, as now it comes to a stage where we can actually start discussing. We will also have the other parts about service management. We need to have the solution in place and understand it. We do have the capability development and others. So it was just the question of prioritization. But the point is also, when we come up with it, and we also fully understand, if we come with something like that, we can't have a huge Excel list describing the processes, describing the roles, etc. This is killing members. It was said at the beginning, I guess, that this needs to be a feasible and realistic framework, which is user-friendly to use for all the members. And we need to find or create the right way of documentation that for those who are hosting FEMDI components, but also for the others, that they know where they can find the things, they know they find the terms of reference, to know where they can find the policies they have to apply to in order to make this work. If people need to try and search for a long time, they will get lost. So this was the start, and now we dig into all of these different components, going ahead with the work. It's been quite a journey, but I think we're in a good way, and we start to grow a really good understanding of what we try to achieve here. So in order to enable a stable and quality process of service to the members. If you move forward, please. Now, what do we expect, what we gain by the end of this activity? So we were talking about the data governance policy. We started on that because we thought it was the most complex, but we certainly also have to consider cybersecurity issues, coming up with a cybersecurity policy, which is a real critical issue at the time, but also with participation management, how to get the members on board, but one side as a data supplier, but also with taking on common components. We have to come up with the documentation for making the users understand how they can use FEMDI and also how to provide data, but it's also the question of quality of service, and we'll hear more about that a little bit later on, to understand what is expected in order to availability, in order to reliability of the system. And finally, and I think that's an important part, we also have to consider how we do govern this whole system in the future. So what will be the terms of reference of a FEMDI management group, since this system won't go away. This should stay hopefully for a long time in a sustainable way. So we need to have some kind of steering group or group taking on these several layers of governance roles. So if you move on. Of course, and as you can see in the red box on the side, this whole thing, it doesn't run on love and air, as we said in one of the meetings. This will also need some resources, financial, but also personal resources. It won't be running by itself. But we still, even though it needs resources, we would like to show that we can also save resources by that, and that we really establish that in order to allow or guarantee a smooth operation. So the members will be able to save resources on their hands, since they don't have to come up with some other tasks, since they can rely on the services of FEMDI. And we had some thoughts on that as well. So Jane will go on and quickly explain what is expected in regards to the costs, and then afterwards we'd like to show this also in an example. So please, Jane, go on.
Thank you, Estelle. So hi, everyone. For those that don't know me, because I didn't put my name up, I'm Jane Wardle. So I'm the program manager for the Work Package 2. which we know as FEMDI, Community Capability Developments. So I'm part of the UMetNet Secretariat. This is just looking at what UMetNet has gone into UMetNet decisions and the budgets for the next programme phase, 24 to 28. So when we put together our estimates, we put them into mandatory, what you really need to run the system, really useful stuff, and then nice to have stuff. So first of all, the biggest caveat on the right-hand side is that a lot of this is going to depend on the quality of service. So if we want exceptional quality of services, chances are estimates will go up. If we want something that's adequate, possibly sub-adequate, probably wouldn't want that, costs will go down. So start off with looking at the nice to haves in the red box. That's the number we came up with. That's lots of great stuff that would be brilliant to do, like a computation service near data, aggregating the local insights, doing some intelligent aggregation, research and development, having new projects, expanding data scope, who can use it. However, that all costs money and it's only nice to have. So we've chopped it out of any budget suggestions at the moment, but it's one to ponder when we get more money. And potentially there has been a suggestion, we have a really good working consortium at the moment, and are there other EU applications that we can go for or other bids to get money to support that type of work, which is outside rodeo. Then we have the two costs around running FEMDI. So the first is a coordinating member. So I guess in the same way that we have maybe the OBS capability area, we have a coordinating member that looks after the program management and how the whole system's running, and that sits with a UMetNet host. So we got the estimates for how much that would cost. And then we've got the community components. So again, similar to other UMetNet programs where a member will offer to run one of the systems that sit underneath. So we'd need a catalog interface, the data explorer, and then API gateway hosts. And I talked about that at Assembly last time for those of you who were there. Now, the purple font is mandatory, and that is what we put into the programme budget, which was kind of agreed, I think, as a placeholder for 2026 onwards. So it's in the 24 to 28 budget, but recognising this is to run an operational FEMDI system. So the higher end of the ranges are things like more like 24/7 support and maintenance of the system. Then finally, the last cost to members is going to be your own personal costs, how you choose how you're going to do your data supply, whether you're going to delegate it, whether you're going to run it all yourself, your technology solutions for running it yourself. So that's completely up to you. So we couldn't possibly do an estimate because this is well out of our scope, and you know your system's best and how it fits in with other pieces of work you're going to do. So that's over 3 years, how much we're estimating at the moment. But big caveat, it's likely to be updated in autumn as we look at quality of services. So the impact on members, I'm going to go back to Estelle in a moment. So at the last case study, Estelle talked us through the Meteor Swiss data warehouse, and she gave a really interesting and useful case study in the amount of effort it currently takes to get data from other organisations. And it was around how they've got over 3,000 stations, they've got 13 organisations, 7 countries, and the amount of time and effort. So Estelle, shall I go back to you for this section, seeing as how it's your thing?
I can do that, actually. We, being a tiny country and embedded in the middle of Europe, so I explained you already, I think it was on the 4th Director-led workshop, that we put a lot of effort into really to get data from specifications around Switzerland in order to be able to run our reading analysis, our models, etc. And actually, I think in the meantime, we even had more additional members added to it. And the last of it took us about 2 years just to get this whole thing going. And it's sometimes really complicated. Just have to say, we do integrate all the data and we'll aggregate it afterwards. So the integration, and I think that was also one discussion at one of the workshops, we don't use the system like the FEMDI system to aggregate things because, as we said, data comes from different places in different kinds. So we do integrate and do the aggregation, but otherwise, I'd like to show on the next slide quickly, we said, and Jane just explained the costs, but I said before that it seems like a lot of money, but I would like to show one an example what we also think was what we can get out on FEMDI and what it would also help us to save money. And I think this is on each of us. So this is one example. This is based on what we normally invested on average over the last, it's almost 20 years now that we did this. And just to give you a bit of an insight and to illustrate on a more concrete example how some resource saving could be done by using FEMDI. So I just said, and actually Jane started with it, we integrated all these countries. So we kind of started to do the steps a little bit similar to this activity chains we had before. We subsided in different activities. We had at the beginning, we had to find out what is even available in the country. We had to normally figure out to find somewhere the information, what is even there. This might be a bit easier with the ones around us. And I mean, for those who exchange data on GTS or nowadays with this data, this information was available, but we were not interested in the information we received anyway. We were interested in additional stations. So we had to figure out what is even there, did some research on websites and what is needed. We had to figure out what we need, what quality. We had to find the needed information to understand what type of quality is a station. But then the next step was, if we had that, and this normally took us quite a little while to even find the information, then we had to figure out who was the person in charge. This is easier if you're in regular exchange with a member or with a Met service, but especially if they were a bit further away, this sometimes took some time to even get to the right person who would be able to and who had the competencies to do that exchange with us. In the next step, we had to define and agree with them on the station sets. We had to understand we had to explain them what we need in regard to metadata, because we have quite a sophisticated metadata repository where we need the information, how they can deliver them to us. We had to discuss data exchange formats. We had to also discuss how we set up this delivery, because we couldn't use the ones in place for this bilateral exchange. So we had to somehow figure out all these different things. Normally this went back and forth quite some times, because both parties wanted to get as little we try to reduce the effort as much as possible. The big chunk of work came afterwards to really establish those things. The implementation of this is this data exchange. So we had to figure out data transmission. It took us normally more than one attempt to get this done. We had some bug fixing. We had to see if their format really fits on what we agreed upon. We had to make sure that so there was always a big back and forth. We had to make our own internal decoding mechanisms. We had to make adaptations, because normally each of these countries delivered another different format. We had to integrate that. We had to make sure that it actually fits to the rest. We had to do some testing. And I said this was normally going in circles, starting, then doing some bug fixing, starting again, and kind of doing it stepwise until we got to the stage where we finally could put it into operational business and use it, and also communicate it to everyone on the inside. But the point is, and I think that's why I think this is so important, it's not done with that. Each year we had an agreement with them that if they had some adapted, corrected data, they would send it again. So we had to set up these annual data deliveries. They had changes in their data sets. We had changes in other things. So it was not done with this initial setup and implementation of this change, which took us a little bit more than 30 days. Well, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a bit more, but I would say that's a good average guess in order to set up the whole system. And then each year we had again to rethink things. We had to investigate if they had some new stations. So the whole started in a reduced way, but it started all over again. Now with FEMDI, what do we expect? If you click, please. With FEMDI, we expect to have the Data Explorer where we can go and find in one place what is around with the necessary information about quality, etc. So I can actually sit together with the people back home and see, and we choose from there and figure out what we need. We don't need to find the person to the contact person on the other side, since we do have a system in place where we can actually then notify and use the message notification system. So we don't have to establish this personal context. And we also, when we do go and look for the stations, we go and look up the information in the Data Explorer and also in the WMO catalog. And there we choose the information we want to retrieve from the specific countries, and we will use the APIs which are already established. So we don't have to really establish, set up, define this data delivery way again for each of these different members. Now, of course, it will also here take us some time. We have to apply, we have to use the APIs, we have to test if it's working, we have to make sure that we can integrate it in a good way. But because it always comes in the same format, we have to do this once, and then it should be much quicker. So as remarkably quicker than the way we had to do it before. And finally, we also do have here, we have to make sure that we have that we subscribe to the data. So if there's something new, we get some alerts, we get the notifications, we can adapt to that. So there's also here, there's some extent, there's an operational business even afterwards, after setting it up. But because it's optimized and it's done the same way for everything, it's also here, it's going to be much easier and much faster to establish this. Especially also in using the system, we can further develop it. So here we're talking about 5 days approximately. I think it's a rough estimation. So even for this one case in one member, we expect for the integration of one additional country. So this was now, you can multiply by 13 or however you have by now. So we expect a saving of up to 27 days, which I think is quite remarkably, because this also has a lot of costs assigned to it. So this as an example to try to explain how FEMDI could really create some real benefit for all of us, making this data exchange, if it's not the international exchange which has been established before, everything going beyond that makes it much easier. And I think with that, we actually come to an end. And before I stop, I was going to start with a small story, and I know I just really want to come back to the issue, to the objective of this operating model. And I'm sure I don't have to explain to many of you, but I think if you set up a new system and if you come up with a new project, you invest a lot of money, and I guess a lot of us had also examples they can look at, and I see this also in the WMO context where we do things, for example, with GBON, how it used to be done. You set up, you come up, you have this great, awesome project, you set it in place, and in quite so many cases, somehow the operations afterwards, it's forgotten. And if we don't have something, a sustainable maintenance of a system, that the means of being able to develop them further, adapt them to arising needs, to actually have clearly assigned roles, who's doing what in order, if you need to address a specific person, also to make sure that someone is monitoring the system, make sure that it meets the requirements of the users. I think all this money invested in the project is actually in danger, because there's a huge risk that people won't stop using something if it doesn't really fit their needs anymore. And I think this work that we did here and the further work we need to do here is really important in order to make here something great work in a long-term sustainable way. And I think it's really worth the time and the resources to invest in that in order to keep FEMDI on a good level to be able to help us provide all these services we expected from, which will help us also make decisions. So I hope, based on what you've seen now over this last half an hour, I'd say, I hope that you understand the reasoning behind why we did it, also why we started with those components, Of course, we will also come up with the others, as mentioned by Owen, with the service level management. We're very well aware that this is important. We also needed a bit more information on the solution, which has now been implemented, that we'll be able to dig into that on a more detailed level. But I hope it gave you an overview, and also that you understand intent behind this work and that you see the importance of what we do here. So, as you did probably with the technical presentation at the beginning of the workshop, it would be really good for you if you could let us know in the chat while we do have a short break if you're content with what you have seen so far, what we've been doing, if you would like to know and understand more about it and get some more details on it, or if you would also be part, if you'd like to be part. ET Policy has been working on it, and we would be very, very happy about having new members on board. This should be something who fits all of you. So if you see someone in your service who would be a good person who would like to contribute to that, I mean, we would be most welcome in all of those. I'm not sure, I think it was said at the beginning that the question should be put into the chat, and I'm not sure. Jane, I'll give back to you for the further proceeding. How you want to go about if there are any questions there.
So thanks, Estelle. I'm not Jane,
Oh,
but
sorry,
I will.
Sorry, Roar. I'm still a bit jet lagged.
Thanks, Estelle. Thanks a lot for staying up that early, getting up that early to talk to us, and thanks also to Morten for stepping in on the first part. So I think we are still doing well on, with respect to time. So if there are any questions to Estelle and Morten, please raise your hand. They are available. So if you have questions, please raise your hand. And then we will also have, I think it says 5-minute break here, but we will have a break until 4 o'clock. I see no hands. I see some letters in the chat. So please also answer the questions the same essentially as previously with an A, B, or C. But if I do not see any hands, then we will take a 8 minutes break and start on the quality of service part.